There was a time when every dish told a story of care, tradition, and imagination. In mid-century America, even leftovers were transformed into comfort and pride. Dishes such as turkey leftover timbale with sage stuffing and cherry chocolate crumble coffee cake turned simple pantry ingredients into table treasures. Each recipe reflected a nation rebuilding after hardship, where creativity replaced convenience and presentation meant everything. From the soft shimmer of a peach vanilla jello salad to the golden aroma of a broiled bacon maple breakfast loaf, these meals carried warmth far beyond taste. They represented families gathering, neighbors sharing, and homes filled with laughter. Today, we return to that heartfelt era when recipes were handwritten, and every bite carried a memory. These 15 dishes are more than forgotten meals, they are chapters of American life that shaped how families cooked, celebrated, and cared for one another. Stay with me, because each of these recipes reveals a story worth remembering. By the end, you will see how these lost creations once defined comfort in every American home. Subscribe to America's Lost Recipes and rediscover the flavors that time almost erased. After Thanksgiving, when the table was cleared and the feast had ended, American homemakers faced a familiar question: what to do with all that leftover turkey? In the 1940s and 1950s, waste was not an option. Every scrap had a purpose, and out of that practicality came a beautiful invention: the turkey leftover timbale with sage stuffing. This dish was elegance built from economy. Instead of reheating plain leftovers, cooks layered diced turkey with a fragrant sage stuffing, binding it together with a light cream sauce and baking it in a ring mold until golden. The result was firm on the outside, tender inside, and rich with the aroma of herbs and butter. When turned out onto a platter, it looked like something meant for a holiday banquet, not the day after. The timbale represented the heart of mid-century cooking, resourceful, refined, and deeply comforting. It took humble ingredients and transformed them into something worth sharing again. Families gathered around the table, plates steaming, grateful that yesterday's feast could become today's joy. In that era, the timbale was more than a meal, it was a reminder that care and creativity could stretch beyond a single celebration. Its quiet charm has vanished from modern kitchens, but its spirit remains, a symbol of gratitude, ingenuity, and home. If dishes like this spark your nostalgia, make sure to subscribe to America's Lost Recipes. Here, we bring back the meals that once turned leftovers into legends and kitchens into the heart of every American story. In post-war America, homemakers found joy in turning ordinary ingredients into extraordinary centerpieces. The mushroom and pea ring in creamy sauce was one of those creations, simple in substance, yet elegant in spirit. It reflected a time when home cooking was about care, pride, and presentation. This recipe began with a handful of pantry staples, tender peas, earthy mushrooms, and a smooth base of butter and flour. These ingredients were folded together, seasoned gently, and poured into a circular ring mold, a kitchen symbol of hospitality and creativity. When baked, the mixture formed a golden, delicate crust that held its shape perfectly. Once unmolded, the ring was filled with a rich cream sauce that flowed into its hollow center, creating a dish that looked as beautiful as it tasted. The contrast of colors, the soft green peas, the golden edges, and the white sauce, made it a showstopper on any mid-century dining table. For families of the 1950s, this dish was more than dinner. It was an expression of gratitude for the return of peace and abundance after years of rationing. It showed how American kitchens embraced resourcefulness while celebrating refinement. Each bite carried the flavors of comfort and the quiet pride of a homemaker who made something wonderful from the simplest things. Today, the mushroom and pea ring stands as a reminder of that thoughtful era, when meals were prepared with patience, served with grace, and remembered for their warmth rather than extravagance. The molds may be gone, but the memory remains, a soft echo from a time when the dinner table was the heart of every home, and creativity turned modest vegetables into something truly remarkable. Cherry chocolate crumble coffee cake. There was a time when weekend mornings carried a sweetness that had nothing to do with sugar, it came from the aroma of baking. In mid-century America, few things captured that feeling better than the cherry chocolate crumble coffee cake. It was the kind of dessert that turned a simple family breakfast into a quiet celebration. This recipe blended two flavors that perfectly balanced one another, the tart brightness of cherries and the deep richness of chocolate. Housewives would fold juicy red cherries into a soft vanilla batter, then scatter semi-sweet chocolate pieces over the top. A buttery crumble made from flour, sugar, and cinnamon finished it off, creating a golden crust that cracked gently under the fork. When it baked, the scent filled every corner of the house, cherries bubbling, chocolate melting, and memories forming. The cake was served warm, often with a cup of percolated coffee or a glass of milk for the children. It was not about luxury or excess, it was about comfort, familiarity, and the joy of gathering before the day began. Each slice carried the warmth of home, the laughter of a quiet Sunday morning, the sound of dishes clinking, and the feeling that life, in that moment, was perfectly enough. The cherry chocolate crumble coffee cake has quietly disappeared from modern tables, replaced by instant breakfasts and hurried mornings. Yet its story remains a sweet reminder of when families slowed down, savored simplicity, and found happiness in a humble pan of cake shared with the people they loved most. Some recipes may fade, but the memories they created never truly leave the heart. Peach vanilla jello salad with cottage cheese. In the sunlit kitchens of the 1950s, few dishes captured the spirit of American creativity like the peach vanilla jello salad with cottage cheese. It shimmered on every picnic table and church potluck, its pastel glow reflecting an era when food was as much about beauty as it was about taste. This dish was part dessert, part side, and entirely nostalgic. It began with canned peaches, tender, syrupy slices that brought summer sweetness to any season. They were folded into a mixture of vanilla gelatin and whipped topping, giving the salad its soft, creamy texture. A generous layer of cottage cheese added balance, turning sweetness into something surprisingly refreshing. When chilled, the jello set into a glistening mold that looked like sunshine on a plate. It was often served on lettuce leaves or in delicate glass dishes, topped with a light dusting of crushed nuts or a cherry for color. Housewives loved how it looked elegant without effort, a perfect blend of modern convenience and homemade charm. Every spoonful offered a taste of innocence, cool, fruity, and comforting. It carried the memory of family picnics, pastel kitchens, and hand-me-down recipe cards tucked into old cookbooks. The peach vanilla jello salad was more than a dish, it was a reflection of the optimism of its time. It represented a generation that embraced innovation, yet held tightly to the traditions that made a house feel like home. Though it has nearly vanished from today's menus, this glowing relic of mid-century America still reminds us that joy can be found in the simplest combinations, a bowl of sweetness, a moment of laughter, and the timeless comfort of sharing something made with care. Ham and pineapple skillet surprise. In the 1960s, America fell in love with the idea of sweet and savory. Cooks began experimenting with contrasts, and few dishes captured that balance better than the ham and pineapple skillet surprise. It was bold, colorful, and delightfully unconventional, reflecting a decade when dinner meant both comfort and flair. The recipe started with thick slices of ham, browned gently in a cast-iron skillet until the edges turned crisp and caramelized. Pineapple rings were then arranged on top, their syrup mingling with sizzling butter and brown sugar to form a glossy glaze. A sprinkle of ground cloves or mustard powder added a faint spice that brought the sweetness to life. As it cooked, the kitchen filled with a fragrance that was both familiar and exotic, smoky, fruity, and warm. Families gathered around, curious and eager, as the skillet was carried to the table still sizzling. Every bite offered harmony, salty ham, golden pineapple, and a glaze that sparkled like nostalgia itself. This dish became a mid-century icon because it celebrated balance between thrift and indulgence, tradition and experimentation. It turned a few simple ingredients into something cheerful and memorable, proving that creativity did not require extravagance. Served with mashed potatoes or buttered rolls, it represented what home cooking truly meant in that era: love, imagination, and a touch of surprise. The ham and pineapple skillet surprise has nearly vanished from modern kitchens, yet its memory endures. It reminds us that food was once an experience, a small celebration of the everyday, shared across generations with pride and joy. Spinach artichoke ring with Swiss melt. In the elegant kitchens of the early 1960s, presentation ruled the dinner table. Every casserole, salad, and baked dish was designed to impress both the eye and the appetite. The spinach artichoke ring with Swiss melt was one such masterpiece, a warm, creamy creation that turned vegetables into the centerpiece of any gathering. The recipe began with tender spinach and marinated artichoke hearts, finely chopped and folded into a mixture of eggs, breadcrumbs, and shredded Swiss cheese. The blend was seasoned with salt, pepper, and a hint of nutmeg, then spooned into a ring mold, that iconic symbol of mid-century creativity. As it baked, the kitchen filled with the aroma of melting cheese and buttered greens, promising something both elegant and comforting. Once unmolded, the golden green ring was topped with a glossy Swiss cheese melt that cascaded down its sides. It was often filled with a creamy mushroom sauce or a light lemon butter drizzle, giving the dish a touch of restaurant-style polish. At a time when entertaining at home was considered an art, this dish reflected hospitality and pride. It offered guests something refined without being extravagant, proof that vegetables could feel indulgent when treated with care. Served alongside roast chicken or on its own as a luncheon highlight, the spinach artichoke ring with Swiss melt captured the charm of an era that valued beauty, balance, and warmth in every meal. Though it rarely appears on modern tables, its spirit lives on, a reminder of when creativity turned simple greens into something extraordinary, and the family dinner table felt like the grandest stage of all. Broiled bacon maple breakfast loaf. There was a time when breakfast was not rushed or routine, it was the heart of the morning, filled with comfort and anticipation. The broiled bacon maple breakfast loaf was one of those dishes that made early hours feel like an occasion. Born in the 1950s, it combined the sweetness of maple syrup with the savory warmth of bacon, creating a flavor memory that stayed long after the plates were cleared. The recipe started with a simple quick bread batter, flour, eggs, butter, and a drizzle of maple syrup. Chopped, crispy bacon was folded into the mix, its smoky saltiness perfectly balancing the sweetness. The loaf was baked until golden, then brushed with more maple syrup and placed under the broiler just long enough for the top to caramelize into a glossy crust. When sliced, each piece revealed marbled streaks of bacon and ribbons of syrup. Served warm with a pat of butter, it filled the room with the scent of breakfast on a Sunday morning, that unmistakable mix of coffee, toast, and something a little special. This dish reflected a time when homemakers took pride in turning ordinary ingredients into something memorable. It brought families together before school, before work, before the rush of the day. It was the kind of breakfast that made everyone slow down for just a moment. The broiled bacon maple breakfast loaf may have faded from modern tables, but its spirit lingers, a reminder that the simplest meals, made with love and patience, once carried the power to start the day not just with food, but with warmth, care, and a touch of sweetness that felt like home. Caramel apple ring with streusel top. In the autumn kitchens of 1950s America, few scents were as comforting as caramel and apples baking together. The caramel apple ring with streusel top captured that season perfectly, a dessert that looked festive enough for a holiday table, yet simple enough for an ordinary family evening. It was the taste of falling leaves, glowing ovens, and cozy nights gathered around the kitchen table. The recipe began with thin slices of tart apples arranged neatly inside a ring mold. A golden batter, rich with butter, sugar, and a hint of cinnamon, was poured over the fruit. Before baking, a generous streusel topping of brown sugar, flour, and oats was sprinkled over the top, adding texture and sweetness. As it baked, the apples softened, the caramel formed naturally from their juices and sugar, and the entire kitchen filled with the deep, nostalgic fragrance of autumn. When unmolded, the ring revealed glistening slices of caramelized apple beneath a crumbly, buttery crown. It was often served warm, with a drizzle of cream or a scoop of vanilla ice cream, a moment of indulgence that felt both familiar and special. For mid-century families, this dish symbolized comfort and gratitude. It was made to celebrate the small joys of the season, a harvest gathered, a home filled with laughter, a table surrounded by love. The caramel apple ring with streusel top is rarely seen today, yet its memory remains golden. It reminds us that dessert was once more than sweetness, it was a way to bring people closer, to honor tradition, and to savor the beauty of simple things made with care and heart. Creamed corn and celery bake. In the comforting kitchens of 1940s America, resourcefulness was an art form. Families made the most of what they had, turning simple pantry staples into dishes that felt hearty and homey. The creamed corn and celery bake was one of those humble triumphs, a side dish that brought warmth to the dinner table without needing anything fancy. It began with two of the most common ingredients in any mid-century home, creamed corn and fresh celery. The corn provided sweetness and body, while the celery added crunch and freshness. Mixed with butter, milk, and a handful of breadcrumbs, the combination created a creamy, textured casserole that was baked until golden and bubbling at the edges. A light dusting of paprika or grated cheese often finished it off, giving the dish both color and comfort. Served beside roast chicken, baked ham, or even on its own, it became a household favorite. The balance of flavors, the soft corn, the tender celery, the buttery crust, made it a perfect example of mid-century simplicity done right. During an era when families gathered at the table every evening, this casserole represented something more than food. It was proof that care could turn everyday ingredients into something memorable. It offered nourishment, but also a quiet kind of joy, the kind that came from cooking with intention and serving with love. The creamed corn and celery bake may have slipped from modern menus, but its legacy endures. It reminds us that comfort does not require extravagance, and that the heart of American cooking has always been about transforming the ordinary into something worth remembering, one golden casserole at a time. Pistachio jello mold with whipped topping. In the pastel-colored kitchens of the early 1970s, no party table was complete without a shimmering jello creation. Among them, the pistachio jello mold with whipped topping stood out, a dessert that blended elegance, playfulness, and unmistakable mid-century charm. Cool, creamy, and beautifully green, it was the dish that made every gathering feel like a celebration. The recipe began with pistachio pudding mix, a proud product of the era's fascination with convenience and color. The pudding was combined with gelatin, crushed pineapple, and finely chopped nuts, creating a mixture that was both silky and textured. Once set in a decorative mold, it emerged with a glossy sheen that caught the light like polished glass. The final flourish was a crown of whipped topping, sometimes dusted with extra pistachios for sparkle and crunch. When served, each slice wobbled gently, that signature mid-century motion that made guests smile. Its flavor was delicate and comforting, nutty, creamy, and lightly sweet, offering a delightful change from traditional cakes and pies. To homemakers, this dessert represented more than novelty. It embodied modern living, easy to prepare, striking to serve, and guaranteed to impress. It turned simple ingredients into something cheerful and memorable, fit for birthdays, holidays, and Sunday suppers alike. As laughter filled the room and coffee cups clinked, the pistachio jello mold with whipped topping became more than food, it became a shared memory. Though rarely seen on tables today, its soft green glow still evokes an era of imagination and joy, a time when dessert was not just about taste, but about the celebration of togetherness that defined America's golden kitchen years. Italian-style beef roll with spinach and mushrooms. In the late 1950s, when American families were discovering international flavors, one dish stood out for its balance of elegance and comfort: the Italian-style beef roll with spinach and mushrooms. It brought the spirit of Italy into the American kitchen, blending rich flavors, hearty texture, and a sense of home-cooked sophistication. The recipe began with thin slices of seasoned beef, pounded tender and layered with sautéed spinach, mushrooms, and breadcrumbs. A touch of garlic, parmesan, and olive oil gave the filling its fragrant depth. The meat was then rolled tightly, secured with kitchen twine, and browned until golden on all sides. Once placed in a baking dish, it was covered with a light tomato sauce and baked slowly until tender enough to slice like butter. When served, each slice revealed a swirl of green, brown, and red, colors that reflected both earthiness and warmth. The aroma of roasted beef and simmered sauce filled the kitchen, carrying with it the comforting promise of a family meal shared at the table. For many homemakers, this dish represented a new kind of creativity. It was hearty but refined, simple yet impressive. It turned an ordinary dinner into something worth remembering, a gesture of love expressed through patience and care. Paired with mashed potatoes or buttered noodles, the Italian-style beef roll offered a taste of something faraway yet familiar. It was a bridge between American practicality and European charm, a perfect reflection of the decade's evolving palate. Though it has quietly disappeared from modern cookbooks, its legacy endures as a reminder that the best meals are often those that tell a story of discovery, family, and the warmth that only a home-cooked dish can bring. Cornbread crusted chicken pie. In small-town America, the cornbread crusted chicken pie was a dish that could turn a regular Tuesday into something worth remembering. It carried the scent of butter and corn through warm kitchens, reminding families that the simplest ingredients could create something extraordinary. It was the kind of supper that tasted like gratitude, humble, hearty, and made with care. The recipe started with tender chunks of chicken simmered gently with onions, carrots, and peas until soft and flavorful. A creamy sauce made from butter, flour, and milk bound everything together, creating a filling rich enough to feel indulgent but comforting enough for everyday life. Instead of a pastry crust, home cooks reached for a bowl of golden cornmeal, mixing it with milk, eggs, and a touch of sugar to form the cornbread topping that made this pie unforgettable. As it baked, the cornbread swelled and browned, forming a crisp, golden lid that sealed in all the savory steam beneath it. When the dish emerged from the oven, it was pure sensory nostalgia, the aroma of corn and butter mingling with tender chicken, the crust slightly crumbly at the edges, soft where it met the sauce. Families would gather, spoons clinking, voices overlapping, as each serving released clouds of steam and flavor. Every bite carried warmth and texture, creamy filling beneath, golden crust above, proof that real comfort didn't come from extravagance but from heart. This pie wasn't just dinner, it was a reflection of an era when food meant family, patience, and presence. Though time has moved on, the cornbread crusted chicken pie remains a symbol of what America once cooked with pride, recipes that filled both stomachs and souls, one spoonful at a time. Old-fashioned tomato soup cake. There was a time when the words tomato soup and cake didn't sound strange together, they sounded brilliant. During the lean years of the 1930s and 1940s, home cooks learned to stretch every can, every crumb, every ounce of flavor they had. Out of that ingenuity came one of America's strangest yet most beloved desserts, the old-fashioned tomato soup cake. It started not as a gimmick, but as a solution. Canned tomato soup added both moisture and subtle tang to cake batter, replacing milk and butter when they were scarce. Housewives would mix it with flour, sugar, and a symphony of warm spices, cinnamon, nutmeg, and cloves, transforming an everyday pantry staple into something unexpectedly rich and comforting. As it baked, the soup's tomato flavor disappeared, leaving behind a deep mahogany crumb that was tender and aromatic. The scent filled kitchens with that cozy holiday warmth, even when there wasn't much to celebrate. Some topped it with cream cheese frosting, others left it plain, dusted with powdered sugar, proof that beauty didn't need extravagance. Families would serve it with coffee after Sunday supper or wrap slices in wax paper for school lunches. Children never guessed the secret ingredient, adults smiled quietly, proud of how necessity had turned into nostalgia. This humble dessert carried the resilience of its era, proof that even in hardship, creativity could thrive. Each bite was a reminder of a generation that refused to let scarcity dull their sweetness. The old-fashioned tomato soup cake may have vanished from modern tables, but its story still stirs hearts, a dish born not just from hunger, but from hope. Because sometimes, the most surprising recipes are the ones that remind us how strong, and how resourceful, America once was. Cornbread crusted chicken pie. In the heart of mid-century America, few dishes felt more like home than a bubbling chicken pie. But the cornbread crusted chicken pie took that comfort to a whole new level. Born in the 1940s South and spread across the country through community cookbooks and Sunday suppers, this dish turned humble pantry ingredients into a golden, hearty masterpiece. Instead of the usual pastry crust, cooks poured a rich, buttery cornbread batter over tender chicken and vegetables, letting it bake into a soft yet slightly crisp blanket of flavor. Beneath that crust hid a creamy filling of shredded chicken, onions, celery, and sometimes peas, all stirred into a sauce thickened with a bit of milk and flour. As it baked, the cornbread absorbed the savory juices, creating a dish that was part pie, part casserole, and entirely satisfying. This recipe reflected an era when thrift and taste had to coexist. Leftover chicken from Sunday's roast found new life by Monday night. Cornmeal, cheap and abundant, offered comfort without compromise. The result was a dish that stretched resources while feeding both stomach and soul. In small towns, this pie became a centerpiece at potlucks and family gatherings. Its aroma, buttery, warm, and faintly sweet, drew everyone to the table before the first slice was even served. One bite carried the essence of rural America, simplicity, ingenuity, and heart. Today, few remember it by name, yet its spirit lives on in every skillet meal or baked casserole that promises warmth and belonging. The cornbread crusted chicken pie was more than dinner, it was a story told in every bite, a story of resilience, comfort, and the enduring magic of homemade food shared with the people you love most.